What if the vast universe, with its constellations and galaxies, has always been pointing toward the smallest, most intimate frontier, the terrain of your own soul? We travel to the ends of the earth, we send probes into the silence of outer space, and yet the most elusive landscape remains the one we carry within. The command inscribed upon the temple of Delphi, "Know thyself," is not an instruction, but a threshold. To step across it is to leave behind the illusions we have so carefully built and to enter into the wilderness of being. We live surrounded by mirrors, polished glass, digital screens, the eyes of others. Yet none of these mirrors can show us what we most need to see. The reflection that truly matters is not visible. It is woven of silence, of doubt, of the fragile recognition that beneath the surface of personality lies something immeasurable. Carl Jung once observed that the modern person suffers not from a lack of material things, but from a lack of meaning. That suffering, if listened to carefully, is itself a doorway, a summons to begin the journey inward. The words carved into Delphi's stone echo not as a command from outside, but as an ancient voice rising from within ourselves. To know oneself is not to create an identity or to cling to labels. It is to strip them away, one by one, until only the bare essence remains. We call ourselves by names, professions, roles, but who are we when the titles vanish? Who remains when the masks are taken off? The Greeks understood this inquiry not as a luxury, but as the very root of wisdom. Without self-knowledge, knowledge of the cosmos is fragmented, hollow, incomplete. To look inward is not always serene. It can be a trembling descent into shadow, into forgotten memories, into truths we have denied. The command is deceptively simple, yet behind it lies a labyrinth, and like the mythic labyrinth of Crete, it is one we must walk alone. No one else can meet the minotaur of our hidden fears, our unspoken griefs, our secret longings. And yet, as in every myth, there is a golden thread, the awareness that even in darkness, something guides us. Imagine your life as a river, winding through seasons, carrying fragments of what you have been. Each bend reflects back a piece of you, some clear, some distorted. To know yourself is to sit by that river and watch, patiently, as the waters reveal their patterns, not rushing to conclusions, not forcing answers, but allowing the depths to speak in their own time. The act of seeing, without judgment, becomes a form of liberation. In truth, self-knowledge is not about possession, but about dissolution. We do not gain the self as though it were a treasure hidden in a cave. We discover instead that much of what we took to be ourselves was never solid. Like mist, it dissolves when touched by the light of awareness. What remains is subtle, luminous, vast. Perhaps this is why the Delphic command has survived through centuries, across languages and cultures. It is not bound to any dogma or system. It whispers to every human being, "Look within, for there you will find both the question and the answer." And so we arrive at the threshold of paradox. To know oneself is at once the simplest of acts, an intimate turning inward, and the most daunting of journeys, stretching across a lifetime. What does it truly mean to step into this inquiry? What are we prepared to find when the search begins to peel away all certainties? The path deepens here, and with it, the mystery unfolds. To know oneself is both the simplest of acts and the most daunting of journeys. For when we turn inward, the surface quiet quickly gives way to an unexpected vastness. What we find within is not a single solid figure waiting to be uncovered, but a labyrinth of shifting passages, mirrors reflecting mirrors, questions birthing more questions. The paradox deepens. The closer we approach, the less we can claim to grasp. The ancients understood this. The Delphic maxim was carved not as an ornament, but as a warning. The path of self-knowledge demands courage. It is easier to project outward, to build towers of opinion and argument, to dissect the stars and measure the seas. To face the uncharted terrain of the psyche, however, is to enter a wilderness where certainties dissolve. It is to walk into the cave where shadows flicker, not knowing whether they belong to monsters or to parts of ourselves we have long abandoned. Jung spoke of this confrontation with the unconscious as a descent into the underworld. There we encounter archetypes, ancestral patterns, fragments of the forgotten. To know thyself is not merely to polish the light of reason, but to befriend the shadows that live within. The self is not a surface to be explained. It is a depth to be endured. And only when we make peace with that depth do we begin to glimpse the wholeness beyond contradiction. Think of it as entering a vast forest at dusk. At first, the shapes are familiar, trees, paths, clearings, but as the light fades, every rustle awakens unease. The instinct is to flee, to turn back toward the safety of what is known. Yet if you remain, if you breathe into the dark, something else begins to stir. The very silence of the forest becomes a companion. What once seemed threatening reveals itself as part of a greater pattern. The unknown was never an enemy. It was the unacknowledged half of yourself. To know oneself, then, is not to seek control, but to surrender control. It is to recognize that the ego, the small, constructed image we defend so fiercely, is only a mask upon the deeper face of being. The Greeks placed the maxim at the entrance of Apollo's temple, the god of light, yet even the god of clarity was understood to dwell beside shadows. The wisdom is not in choosing one over the other, but in seeing both as necessary, inseparable, two halves of the same coin. This is why the command is not a call to narcissism, nor a license for endless self-analysis. It points instead to the recognition that the self, when seen clearly, is no longer confined to the small, separate I. The discovery is humbling. To know oneself is to discover that the self is inseparable from the whole. Just as a wave cannot exist apart from the ocean, so too does our being find its meaning only in relation to the greater flow of existence. The journey inward opens into the infinite outward. The labyrinth folds into itself, revealing that the center is everywhere and the boundaries are illusions. To know the self is to dissolve the walls we thought defined us and to glimpse a freedom that was hidden in plain sight. And yet, the paradox lingers. If to know oneself is to go beyond oneself, then what is it that truly knows? Where is the knower when the known dissolves? What remains when the final mask has fallen and silence becomes the only mirror? The path turns again, and with it the mystery deepens. And so we return to the lingering paradox. If the self dissolves in the act of knowing, who is it that remains to witness? This question, like a koan whispered in the chambers of the mind, is not meant to be solved, but lived. For the truth is not a conclusion, but a presence, not an answer, but a deepening silence. The command, "Know thyself," is often read as an invitation to build definitions, to catalog traits, to name and categorize the movements of the psyche. Yet the deeper current of wisdom points elsewhere. To know oneself is not to trap the self in words, but to release it from the prison of names. The essence is not what can be described, but what silently observes description itself. Imagine standing before a mirror that does not reflect your features, but your being. At first you search for familiar outlines, your story, your roles, your masks. But the more you look, the more the forms dissolve. What gazes back is not you as you once believed, but the boundless awareness in which all forms rise and fall. To know thyself is to awaken to this recognition that what you are cannot be possessed, cannot be lost, cannot be confined. The sages carved their warning in stone because they knew how easily the human heart forgets. We are tempted again and again to cling to fragments, to build an identity upon sand. Yet the ocean always returns to wash the shore clean. Again and again we are invited to see that beneath the transient waves, the water itself remains, and that water is what you are. When we dare to follow the maxim to its end, the self we thought we knew dissolves like mist under the morning sun. What remains is not emptiness, but fullness, an intimacy with all things, a recognition that every breath belongs not to me or you, but to the rhythm of the cosmos itself. The seeker disappears, and what is left is life aware of itself. This is the heart of the Delphic wisdom. To know yourself is to remember what cannot be forgotten. It is to awaken from the dream of separation into the quiet splendor of unity. It is to see that the temple was never in Delphi, nor in books, nor in distant teachers, but in the still chamber of your own awareness. So the words carved in ancient stone still echo now across centuries, across languages, across the veil of forgetting. Know thyself, not as an achievement, but as a remembrance, not as a destination, but the very ground upon which you stand. And if this reflection has stirred something in you, if it has touched a silence you wish to carry further, you are welcome to walk alongside us. Share this path, subscribe, and let us continue the journey together.